guys, how are you? And welcome to another video edition of our Triad discussion. This week you're going to be looking at a very challenging subject. I'm sure you've already heard it in your family group midweeks this week as we look at understanding God through His choices. And it's very challenging. It was designed to be challenging. It was designed to be thought-provoking and to really call on each of us as disciples to dig deeper in our Bibles. But at the bottom line, as you will learn in this Triad discussion, the goal of this is a simple one, that God invites all of us to trust in Him, that we must trust ourselves unto Him to be saved. And that is an issue of faith. And in this Triad discussion, we really want to hit on a couple of principles in that really will cause you to think, cause you to meditate more on your word, but I believe to cause you to get deeper in your relationship with God. Because then you're going to read a couple of passages in Psalms 111. It's very clear that the work of God is trustworthy. The decisions, the choices that God makes, they are trustworthy, far better than our own choices. In 1 Timothy 2, we know that God desires all to believe, that everyone would believe and entrust themselves to Him to be saved. God desires, or should I say, God grieves over death. We need not fear that God's choices are choices that are made out of a hardened heart. One who does not have compassion. God loves everyone. And God is so displeased at death, especially the death of those that are unrighteous. God does not delight in that at all. But what God desires from each of us is simple. A genuine relationship. God's not going to force us to love Him. But God will give us opportunities and set up the environment that is the most conducive for us to fall in love with Him. He desires true love, a genuine relationship with us. You're going to read a couple of stories. The story of Esau and Jacob, and then you're also going to read most of the story of Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh during the time of Moses and the Exodus. And these stories really are going to give us some insight into God. And we're going to have some questions on that, because once you read that, there's some great questions that we're going to look at. Is one, why does God choose one and doesn't choose another? What are some insights that you got out of the Scriptures? What are some things that you saw in the Bible as you read these stories that give you some keys to why God chose some but did not choose another? Are we pawns? Another question is going to come up. Are we pawns or are we willing participants? It's a great discussion question. Are we willing participants or are we pawns? And those stories that you will have just read give you great insight in that. Behavior. Does it have anything to do with the choices that God makes? Do we see the behavior of some really dictating the choice that God made? Do we see any of that in those Scriptures? Did God make the right choice? This is another great discussion. And if you believe He made the right choice, well, why? Tell me why. What did you see? Discuss this with each other. This is going to challenge us to go deeper in our Bible. And then a great question, which I think is phenomenal. What's the big picture? In each of those scenarios, what was the big picture? And then you'll get a chance to read about Saul and his conversion. And yes, God said, I've chosen you as an instrument of mine to go, but you're going to suffer for my name. Why would God choose him to suffer for His name? What's the big picture in that? Who was affected by that? I mean, when you think about Paul and his call to the Gentiles, and yet God said, you must suffer for my name. Many of us would not be Christians today if it were not for Paul, because most of us are Gentiles. What an amazing act of love on God to choose one man, and to see that Paul had the kind of faith to endure great hardship and suffering, even though he didn't know us. This is going to be a powerful discussion. Make it yours. I love you, and God will be with you.